Hey everyone, and welcome to another Konoha Reviews. Today we talk about the surprise hit Phasmophobia. Though this year has seen a lot of delays for AAA titles, 2020 has been a pretty good year for the smaller games, with some surprise hits coming out in the second half. Phasmophobia only blew up maybe a week or two ago, but I had my eye on it for a longer time. Back in September 27th, the game was recommended to me by the Steam algorithm. Already then, it had overwhelming positive reviews, and the 4-player co-op experience really appealed to me. Unfortunately, none of my main guys that I play games with seemed interested, but after some persuasion, I finally got them to agree and play with me. And thus, I can finally do a proper review, though I should also mention that this is an early access game. I think it's the first early access review I do on the channel, and so I might someday do a review again when the game is fully released. But for now, I am going to do a review and tell you if you are getting your money's worth with how the game is in its current state. So first, let's talk about the premise. What is Phasmophobia? The game follows the premise we know and love from many ghost hunting shows. In this game, you, and preferably 3 other friends, head into buildings that are haunted. Your goal is not to get rid of the ghost, but instead identify what type of ghost it is so that your company can then send a team to effectively get rid of it. You do this by making use of various gadgets, including an EMF meter that will light up if a ghost is nearby, or a UV light that can reveal hand and fingerprints left by the ghosts on doors and light switches. You can also place cameras around the different rooms and then head back to the van outside to check the monitor for paranormal activity and get evidence that way. There's also a book you can leave around, and some ghosts might write something in it, or you can use a small radio known as a spirit box that will reveal if the ghost can talk or not. So you are expected to do some paranormal detective work here, and for those who've been coming to my channel for a longer time, you all know that I love myself some good detective games. The goal of the game is to gather 3 different pieces of evidence, and then on those 3 evidences, base what type of ghost it is. If your assumption is correct, then you get rewarded with money and XP, which will let you unlock and buy more equipment, including more video cameras, a motion or sound sensor, and a very handy headlight so you can have your flashlight out even if you are holding something else. Now, I said that you need to find 3 pieces of evidence, but that is easier said than done. Currently, there are over 10 different types of ghosts in the game, which for an early access version is actually very cool. The type of ghosts and their behavior also differ quite greatly. A ghost like a demon is way more aggressive than others and will attack sooner and more often. But something like a poltergeist will take its time and taunt you by throwing a lot of stuff around. You also have ghosts that are really shy, and thus almost never reveal a sign of themselves if more than 1 people is near her. You even have some ghosts that can travel through walls or levitate, and thus don't leave footprints that can be found with the UV light. I mentioned too that you can, for example, use the radio to make contact or have the ghost write something in the spirit book, but not all the ghosts do. And thus, it's your group's job to discover what the ghost does and does not do and base the evidence off of that. It honestly is such a great and cool premise and works really well in multiplayer. We have had many paranormal activity type maps in games like Gmod, but the goal there was always to just go through a level and be done with it. Here, you actually need to pay attention, and there's actually a lot more thinking and gameplay involved in terms of solving the puzzle. Everyone can carry 3 items at once. In the beginning, you will only have access to very basic equipment, and thus most will carry a flashlight and 2 other items. Because of this item limit, you really have to communicate with your group and decide on who does what. Maybe one person will pick up the video camera and set them up around the house, while another player picks up the EMF reader and looks for activity around the house. What's cool too is that back in the utility truck, where it's safe, players who feel a bit too scared can rest a bit, but also still be active of the experience since data updates there in real time. Footage from the video cameras can be seen in real time, ghostly activity in the perimeter can be monitored, and later even sound and movement sensors too. So it would almost be like having one back at the truck for tech overwatch to guide the others. What is cool too is that the game has voice recognition, and thus, when you have the radio and try to make contact with the ghost, you actually have to speak into your microphone and ask it questions like, "Where are you?" The first time where you actually hear a ghost reply to you is freaking scary as hell. What's also a really awesome thing is that the in-game voice chat is proximity based, meaning that if all the players are very close to each other, they can hear everyone just fine. But the further you are away from people, the less you can hear them, and at a certain point, you can even be out of voice range. For the first few levels that take place in the suburban homes, you'll be able to hear each other throughout mostly. But some of the bigger later levels are so big that you will have those moments where you split up and cannot talk to the others. This creates some amazing tense moments. The same goes for the guy back in the truck, who might see something spooky on the monitor of one of the video cameras, but he has no way of communicating with his teammates. Or what if you split up into groups of 2? While you and your teamed up buddy explore one side of the building, you don't know if it's going well with the other group. You can use a walkie-talkie to talk to the other players from a great distance, and the game adds a radio rush to it. The cool thing too is that when something paranormal happens, the sound of the other people's voices can become distorted, which is pretty scary as well. There are currently around 6 levels available. There's a tutorial house, then 2 suburban homes with 2 floors, 2 farmhouses, one with an attic and one without, a large high school, and a giant asylum. For a $14 early access game, I think that this is enough areas, especially because it does not feel annoying to redo the levels, as the areas and pattern of the ghosts are randomized, and the fact that there are more than 10 ghosts to discover means there's a lot of replayability. So the game is all about atmosphere, because as you move around the house, things will start happening that might give a hint on what type of ghost you are dealing with. Doors might close on their own, or lights will start flickering. You might hear a chilling laugh or moan, or hear footsteps near you. Phones can start ringing. Items can be tossed around. A lot of different things can happen, which keeps the scares fresh. The game is not really a jump scare game, with something popping up right in front of your face. But the game might be scarier than most games that do this, because there you anticipate it, and here it is all randomized. The longer you take to complete a level, the more aggressive the ghost becomes. We found out that usually the point where the ghost really becomes aggressive and will try to kill you off is around 25 to 30 minutes, but that also depends on what type of ghost it is. At a certain point, it can for example decide to shut the front door for 20 seconds and actively start to hunt you down, showing itself to you. Moments like these are absolutely terrifying and are maybe the closest you get to jump scares, since the ghost will suddenly pop up, but usually pretty far away from you, which is still scary since it will head towards you to murder you. And the graphics of the game are in all honesty pretty bad, especially the main player character models. It has that typical Unity feel to it, but I will say that the ghosts themselves are really well and scarily modeled, and especially the lighting is really well done and atmospheric. Seeing other players' flashlights illuminate dark rooms on the night vision monitor looks really great and reminds me of scenes from the Blair Witch or Wreck. The cool thing too is that the game is not simply a game where you are awaiting the ghost to come and attack you. It's not an action game, and thus you cannot fight it, but you can bring a crucifix or salt, and some of the ghosts will have a reaction to this and might refrain from attacking for a while. There's just so much possible, and the game goes so much deeper than one initially expects. Each ghost has strengths and weaknesses, and you can use these to your advantage once you learn them. The levels themselves also add great variety with how to play them. The first few, that are the suburban houses, are pretty similar, and since they are small, the group can simply put 3 or 4 cameras in different rooms and search everywhere with the equipment at hand to find clues. But later levels, like the high school and the asylum, are so massive that it's better to have, for example, 2 or maybe even 3 people with an EMF reader or other gadget, since the map is simply too big to cover it with only one player handling that particular gadget. Honestly, I cannot praise this game enough. It feels so much better and well thought out than your cliché horror game, in the style of Slender or in the style of Five Nights at Freddy's. Yet at the same time, it still takes elements from those games and makes them an enjoyable part of this experience. The player, who monitors all the video footage back at the truck, has a bit of a Five Nights at Freddy's feel, while the random movement of the ghost feels like a Slender-like entity. It's really an awesome horror game that promotes team play, communication, and overall detective work as you put all the hints together. I currently have around 12 hours into the game and have now got the feeling that I've seen most of all the levels and many of the ghosts. So I feel pretty good with probably leaving it at that before the next big update, but I think that 10 to 12 hours of solid, engaging, and scary fun is well worth the $14 price tag. The game is honestly not that great to play on your own, and it can still be fun with 2 people, but in my opinion, you have to go with at least 3 or 4 people to really enjoy it to its fullest potential and gameplay mechanics. My only real critique is mostly aesthetics in terms of graphics, where the animations and character models of the players is simply pretty bad. Same thing can be said for if another player is killed, they just simply stand there and then suddenly they are dead. It's not really frightening and can even be a bit awkward. This of course can be polished out in future updates, but since this is an early access review for its current state, I will critique it for that now. But other than that, Phasmophobia is a game I can recommend not only to those fan of horror games, but also fan of co-op games, since it's such a cool and unique co-op experience. In the end, Phasmophobia will get an 8.5. An absolute surprise hit for sure. If it was more polished, it would have gotten very close to that magical 9. But since the game is such a worldwide hit, I hope to get some really significant updates in the future. There's a lot possible that they can do with this to make it even more awesome. They can add new levels, new types of ghosts, new types of evidences, new gadgets to use, and of course, new types of scares. I wish this game a great future ahead and hope to return to it once again in time to see how great it has become.